He stood on a street corner, hungry, tired, and invisible to the world. To most, he was just another homeless man, mocked, judged, and written off without a second thought. People laughed at his worn clothes, whispered cruel words, and looked away in disgust. But what they never realized was that behind the dirt and brokenness lived a history that once lit up stadiums and broke records. How could a man who once tasted glory fall so far? And what shocking truth were they about to discover? The city was alive with noise, cars rushing past, neon lights flickering, strangers moving quickly to wherever they needed to be. Yet in the middle of it all sat a man no one seemed to notice. His clothes were torn, his hands calloused, and his eyes carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories. To passers-by, he was just another homeless man on a forgotten corner, holding a small cardboard sign that read, "We'll work for food." Every day was the same. He searched trash bins for scraps, found shelter beneath bridges, and tried to sleep while the cold pavement bit through his skin. Sometimes people tossed him a coin, but more often they tossed him words, sharp, mocking, dismissive. To the world, he was invisible. To himself, he was fading. But what no one around him could see was that he hadn't always been this way. There had been a time when crowds cheered his name, when his body was strong, and when his dreams seemed limitless. He once had a life that others envied. Now, reduced to silence and survival, his past remained a buried secret. And the cruel irony was this: the same people who mocked him would one day discover the truth about who he really was, and regret every word they ever said. The days blurred together for him, morning light creeping over cracked sidewalks, nights spent in alleys where the wind cut through layers of worn fabric. He had learned to move silently, to survive without drawing too much attention. But no matter how hard he tried to disappear, attention always found him. And it was rarely kind. People didn't just ignore him, they targeted him. On street corners, teenagers pointed and laughed, daring one another to throw scraps of food at his feet as though he were some spectacle. Office workers in pressed suits turned their noses up when he passed, whispering words like lazy and worthless, never stopping to wonder what had brought him to this point. To them, he was a stereotype, another black man on the street, stripped of humanity. One afternoon, he offered to fix a stranger's car for a sandwich. The man looked at him, smirked, and called his friends over. They gathered around, mocking his sign, "We'll work for food." Phones came out. Cameras rolled. Laughter filled the air as he knelt beside the car, dirty hands searching for tools that weren't even offered. They didn't see desperation, they saw entertainment. And when the video of his humiliation went online, strangers across the city joined the chorus of ridicule. But humiliation wasn't the only battle he faced. At night, he was watched closely by security guards who told him to move along whenever he tried to rest near a store. In shelters, he was turned away when beds filled up, often handed excuses that felt more like judgments. On buses, when he scraped together enough change to ride, people shifted in their seats, clutching their bags tighter, as though poverty itself made him dangerous. Every insult chipped away at him, yet deep inside, a flame refused to go out. He knew who he once was. He knew what he had achieved. But to reveal it now felt impossible. Who would believe that this man, covered in dirt and hunger, had once stood on podiums, medals heavy on his chest, cameras flashing his name to the world? Still, there were moments when the past tried to surface. When he watched cars speed down the freeway, he remembered the roar of engines on the track. When sneakers slapped against the pavement, he thought of the rhythm of his own racing shoes, pounding toward finish lines that once seemed endless. Those memories were both comfort and curse, a reminder of what was lost and what could never be reclaimed. The cruelty around him only grew bolder. One night, while searching for food behind a restaurant, he was confronted by two men who accused him of stealing. They shoved him against the wall, cursing, telling him to go back where he came from. He raised his hands, tried to explain he had taken nothing, but their minds were already made up. To them, his appearance was guilt enough. They pushed him into the dirt, leaving him with bruises and the sharp taste of injustice. And yet, he endured. Each morning, he rose again, clutching his cardboard sign like a lifeline, whispering to himself words of survival. Then came the day that would begin to shift everything. He had chosen a busy corner, the kind where cars stalled at long red lights and pedestrians rushed between shops. Holding his sign, he approached politely, offering, "I can fix it. Anything. Just a meal." Some ignored him. Others sneered. And then came a man with a luxury car, polished so bright the sunlight bounced off its hood. The homeless man spotted something familiar, a sound in the engine, a rough idle he knew by heart. Without hesitation, he stepped closer and said, "I can fix that. Just a meal." The driver laughed in his face. "You? Fix this? You don't even look like you can fix yourself." His friends in the passenger seats chuckled, pulling out their phones to record. But the homeless man didn't flinch. He leaned in, listening carefully to the subtle sputter of the car. The knowledge came back instantly, like muscle memory. He pointed to the problem, described it with precision. The laughter stopped for a moment, replaced by uneasy silence. How could a man like this know so much? Still, the driver waved him off, muttering something cruel before speeding away. Yet, the moment lingered. For the first time, witnesses saw a crack in the image of worthlessness. Something about his confidence, the sharpness in his voice, it didn't fit the story they had written for him. But instead of sympathy, more cruelty followed. Videos spread online, mocking him as the fix-it-for-food guy. Strangers laughed at his desperation, replaying clips of his offers as if survival was a joke. The city turned him into a meme, but no one asked the most important question: how does a man know so much? Where did he learn it? Days turned into weeks, and whispers began to swirl. Some who had seen him up close swore there was more to him than met the eye. They noticed the way his eyes lit up at the sound of engines, the way his posture changed when talking about machines, the way he carried himself, not like a man defeated, but like one who had once known greatness. Still, society wasn't ready to give him a chance. He was pushed, judged, and broken down at every turn. Yet in silence, he held on to the truth of who he was. And though the world mocked him, the day was coming when they would no longer laugh. Because soon, the same man they ridiculed on sidewalks and online would stand before them, not as the hungry, forgotten figure they thought they knew, but as something entirely different. And when that moment came, it would silence every cruel word ever spoken. The afternoon sun hung heavy over the city, beating down on cracked sidewalks and restless crowds. On a busy intersection, people were gathering, drawn by the sound of an argument, by the sight of a man they had already decided was worthless. He was there again, standing with his cardboard sign, offering what little he had left, his knowledge, his skill, his dignity. "I can fix it. Anything. Just a meal." His voice was steady, though his stomach ached with hunger. A luxury sports car had stalled at the light, its engine sputtering, smoke curling from the hood. The driver, a young man with sharp clothes and sharper arrogance, stepped out, cursing under his breath. The homeless man stepped forward, instinct pulling him toward the machine the way a musician is pulled to a forgotten instrument. He knew that sound. He knew exactly what was wrong. "I can help," he said quietly. The driver looked him up and down, dirty clothes, sunken cheeks, rough hands. Then he laughed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You? Help me? You can't even help yourself." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Phones came out. Cameras recorded. Another humiliation ready to be posted online. But instead of shrinking away, the homeless man stepped closer. His eyes sharpened, his posture straightened, and for a moment, the man beneath the rags revealed himself. "Your fuel line is leaking. If you start it again, you'll flood the system. Open the hood, I'll show you." The crowd went silent. His voice carried a certainty that could not be faked. The driver hesitated, smirk fading into something else. Confusion, maybe even fear. He popped the hood. The homeless man leaned in, hands moving with the precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Within minutes, the sputtering was gone, the engine humming as smoothly as it once had. Gasps rose from the crowd. The laughter had stopped. Phones were still raised, but now they weren't recording for mockery, they were capturing something else entirely. The driver stood frozen, words caught in his throat. Finally, he asked, How did you know that? The homeless man looked up, eyes dark and steady. Because this isn't the first engine I've fixed. It was a simple answer, but in that moment, the facade cracked. The crowd saw not just a homeless man, but a glimpse of something buried beneath the dirt and despair. But the revelation didn't end there. Someone in the crowd gasped, then whispered. Another voice joined in. Wait, isn't that? A phone screen flashed with an old photograph, grainy but clear. A younger version of him, clean-shaven, strong, standing tall on a podium with a trophy in his hands. The whispers grew louder, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. It is him, it's really him, that's the champion, the racer. The driver stepped back, eyes wide. He knew the name now, the name the world had once cheered. This wasn't just a man who could fix an engine. This was a legend who had once broken records, who had once carried the pride of a nation. But before admiration could take root, judgment returned. Someone scoffed from the crowd, if you're really that great, then what are you doing here? Why are you on the streets? The question cut deeper than any insult. His chest tightened, his throat ached. Memories crashed against him, contracts lost, sponsors withdrawn, opportunities stolen not because of his skill but because of the color of his skin. Racism hadn't just sidelined him, it had erased him. One headline after another painted him as reckless, difficult, undeserving. One mistake, amplified beyond proportion, had been enough to bury a career. He stood there, the crowd watching, waiting for him to defend himself. But what words could erase years of injustice? What explanation could undo the truth that he had been cast aside not for lack of talent, but for who he was? Tears stung his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He straightened his back, lifted his chin, and met their gaze. You ask why I'm here? His voice rang clear, stronger than it had in years. Because sometimes the world doesn't care how fast you run, or how much you win. Sometimes the world only sees your skin. And when they decide you don't belong, they take everything from you, your career, your name, your future. That's why I'm here. Silence spread through the crowd. For the first time, people weren't laughing. They weren't mocking. They were listening. But the moment was short-lived. A voice from the back shouted, "Liar. If you were really that great, you wouldn't be begging for food now." Another added, "People like you always blame the system." The tide threatened to turn again. Judgment pressed in, heavy and suffocating. And then, sirens. Police cars pulled up, lights flashing. Officers stepped out, hands on their belts. "What's going on here?" one barked. The crowd shifted nervously. All at once, the spotlight turned back on him. A homeless black man, surrounded by a restless crowd, police approaching. He knew how quickly this could end. He had seen it happen before. The officer's eyes narrowed. "You causing trouble here?" "No," he said quietly. "I was just." Hands where I can see them. His heart raced. Phones went up again, recording every second. He raised his hands slowly, palms open, the weight of history pressing down on him. The officer stepped closer. "You got ID?" He shook his head. "Not anymore." The officer's hand moved to his holster. The crowd murmured. Every second stretched into eternity. One wrong move, one twitch, and his story could end here, not as a legend, not as a man, but as another statistic. The fear was suffocating, but beneath it burned something else, defiance. He looked straight at the officer, straight at the crowd, straight at the world that had discarded him. "I've raced faster than fear. I've stood higher than hate. If this is the end, then let it be known, I was more than what you see standing here." The officer hesitated, hand tightening on the weapon, tension thick enough to choke the air. And in that suspended moment, with the world watching, the truth of who he was could no longer be denied. Would this be the day he was silenced forever, or the day the world finally remembered the legend they had tried to forget? The flashing lights eventually faded. The officers, under the watchful eyes of dozens of recording phones, chose restraint over escalation. For once, the presence of cameras protected him. They told him to move along, their words sharp but their weapons untouched. The crowd dispersed slowly, some whispering about what they had just seen, others scrolling through their phones to confirm what they now suspected, that the man on the corner wasn't just a nameless figure. He had been somebody. But as the night fell and the streets grew quiet, he returned to the same place he always did, the shadows. The truth was out there now, pieces of it anyway, circulating on social media. Clips of him fixing the car. Old photographs resurfacing. Side-by-side comparisons of the homeless man and the racer who once held trophies high above his head. Some posts called it inspirational. Others mocked him still, questioning how someone with so much talent could fall so far. For him, it wasn't about recognition anymore. It was about survival and dignity. He knew the world had a short memory, quick to sensationalize and quicker to forget. But for a fleeting moment, he had reminded them of something they had tried to erase, that greatness can be buried, but it can't be destroyed. And yet, the deeper wound remained. His story wasn't just about engines, or trophies, or glory lost. It was about the way an entire system could strip a man of his worth because of the color of his skin. It was about doors that never opened, opportunities snatched away, and narratives written by people who never wanted him to succeed in the first place. This wasn't only his story, it was the story of countless others. Black men and women pushed to the margins, their talent questioned, their humanity overlooked. Some rise above it. Some break under its weight. And some, like him, live in the shadows of what could have been. The crowd that mocked him that day will remember the shock of realizing who he truly was. But the lesson isn't about one man's hidden past. The lesson is about us. About how quickly we judge. About how easily we dehumanize those who have less. About how racism doesn't just wound individuals, it robs entire communities of potential, brilliance, and hope. He may never return to the racetrack. He may never reclaim the life he once had. But in that moment, he became something more than a forgotten name. He became a mirror, reflecting the harsh truth society often tries to look away from. And so, the question lingers, how many more legends will we ignore before they're gone? How many more lives will be broken before we learn to see people not for their circumstances, but for their humanity? Because if a man who once touched greatness can be reduced to invisibility, what does that say about us? The next time you pass someone on the street, ask yourself, are you seeing a stranger, or are you overlooking a story that could change the world?